Hey, welcome to another episode of Theological Pipe. My name's Chris. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a little bit shorter than usual. I think I'm trying something new for the YouTube podcast page. So I'm going to try something different. If it works, great. If not, I'll go back to doing it the way I normally do for the YouTube page. But thanks for joining us. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening and commenting and sharing and getting involved. So continue to do that. The idea of Theological Pipe, I'll kind of tell you where I got the idea of how I was going to do this. I've had a blog post or a blog page, Theological Pipe, for quite a while, for a few years. Always thought about maybe doing a podcast, but just never had the correct idea or what I was going to do with it. And I was watching on YouTube a Joe Rogan clip from one of his podcasts. And he had Jordan Peterson, who's a clinical psychologist, and Bret Weinstein, who's a evolutionary biologist, on his program. And he was talking, and Joe Rogan does a great job because he lets people talk. And these two guys are super smart, top guys in their field. And they were talking in this clip about Charlottesville. And I watched this clip a few months ago, and that event happened a while ago. And Jordan Peterson started talking about it from a psychological perspective. And I was interested. He's super smart. Weinstein's super smart. Joe kind of kept quiet and let them talk. And Jordan Peterson was talking about Charlottesville and how, the Nazis, the white supremacists who were there. There was very few of them, but there was a small group of them there. The media covering them, the other people that were there to watch. And Jordan is covering and talking about this from a psychological perspective. And it was interesting. I was like, okay, this is really cool. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, how is Eric going to talk about it from an evolutionary biologist standpoint? And he did. He brought in his perspective, and Joe and Eric and Jordan would go back and forth and discuss things and talk about things. And it was interesting, and they didn't always agree. And Eric would say, well, this is why I think it's a biological problem with racism and that kind of stuff. And then Jordan would say, well, it's more psychological. And he'd say, well, I disagree. Well, what about this? Have you ever considered this? And it was really interesting, it was over my head. But the whole time I'm sitting there watching, saying, I think they're both missing the spiritual aspect of what's going on there in Charlottesville. Again, I don't care how many or how big or small the crowd was, and then the other crowd and the way people reacted. I think there was a spiritual issue going on, a theological issue. And not that I would have put myself in that place, because again, they're way smarter than me, way more intelligent, on a different plane. But I said, how cool would it be to have somebody there discussing and say, have you ever thought about the spiritual aspect of it? Now, I don't know. I would assume Jordan would probably say there's a little more spiritual element to it. And Eric Weinstein, being an evolutionary biologist, may not, but I think he would listen. And I just thought it would be interesting. So it was at that point a few months ago where I listened to that. I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a podcast and just talk about things from a theological perspective, from the perspective that there is a God, and cover things in that manner. And so that's kind of where this podcast came about. And, we're only a few episodes in, and I'm kind of still getting my feet wet and trying to feel my way through how to do things. But, we've talked about COVID. We've talked about Black Lives Matter. We've talked about the media in other episodes. I've told a couple funny stories, and that's kind of what I want to do. And so I thought for today's episode, I was going to get into the mask issue, but not in the way that you think. Here in Oklahoma, I'm in Oklahoma, and live in Broken Arrow, which is a suburb of Tulsa. But in the Tulsa City Council just passed a mask ordinance that everyone now has to wear a mask when they're out in public. Stores have done that. Walmart is making masks mandatory when you go into the store. Other places have done that. You've seen it on businesses. When you go to the business, it says, hey, you have to wear a mask if you come inside. And I understand the both sides of the argument to a point. I'm not a conspiracy guy that thinks that people are trying to get us to wear masks to control us somewhere down the line. I'm not saying there's elements of that somewhere, but that's an extreme there. And I'm not saying that the virus is a hoax. It's obviously not. And I just don't think that's where I'm at in terms of wearing a mask or not. What interested me was the reaction of so many people on social media and so many of my friends on social media who are just beyond upset about it. And again, I get it, and I think that there's a group I have that are extremely upset and say, I'm not going to Tulsa, I'm going to stay in Broken Arrow, because Broken Arrow right now doesn't have a mask ordinance. And then there's a group that says, well, thank goodness, it's about time we have a mask ordinance. We should be wearing them. This is deadly serious. And that's fine. And I put a quote on my Facebook page the other day. It said, I don't know, or today I think it was, says, I don't know. That was a quote saying me. It was a reminder for me. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the coronavirus. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I just kind of follow the numbers. I look at the numbers. I look at this. Listen, cases are going up. That's not good. Deaths so far seem to have not gone up with the cases, which is a good thing. Now there's a lag. So, I'm hoping and praying that the deaths stay down, and maybe the people that are getting sick are younger. They're able to recover quicker. Maybe the virus is weakening. Maybe that we have better ways of combating it with medication and with different treatments and stuff like that. So maybe even as cases rise, let's hope the deaths stay down and people don't get sick. But again, the reaction from the mass, and I understand both sides. And here's where I was going to kind of cover this just as quick as I can. Again, trying something new on YouTube and want to just go and test it and make sure it works right. But I think there's something greater going on than just the fact that, a politician says you need to wear a mask. Or someone on the media, someone on the news says, hey, why aren't you wearing a mask? You see on the news now a lot, they'll show pictures of beaches, or they'll show pictures of a Trump rally, or they'll show pictures of a protest. And depending on who's covering it, they'll say, well, this isn't bad, but this is, and this is horrible. And can you believe this person not wearing a mask? And this person is wearing a mask, and look at this person, touching their face or whatever. And I get it. And I get the reaction, because I think one of the issues going on for me is something, it has to deal with trust. If you look at the people that are telling us what to do, they're politicians and they're media people. I mean, that's who we kind of, the media kind of tells us the story, and the politicians are the one that drive policy and kind of are there to kind of protect us and help us and to move us forward. And so I wanted to look at something just look at Congress, the politicians, and you can throw the president in there if you want, and because he's just as divisive as Congress. If not more so. But congressional approval right now. Well, let me go back. In 1979, when they started keeping track of this is a Gallup poll, I believe. They keep track of congressional approval. In 1979, the approval of Congress was under 20%. It was then above 20%, and it ranged from anywhere from 40 to 50. At sometimes it was up to 60, but it ranged above 20% from 1980 to 1992. And in 1992, it fell below 20% again. And then in 1993, it went back up above 20%. It stayed above 20% until 2010. So from 1979 to 2010 to 2010, it was below 20% twice. The approval of Congress, of our leaders, of our politicians. In 2010, in 2011, in 2012, in 2013, in 2014, in 2015, in 2016, in 2018, it skips a year. In 2017, it was above 20%. It was like 22%. 2018, 2019, and 2020. In every one of those years, the approval of Congress has been below 20%. So from 1979 to 2010, it was below 20% twice. And then from 2010 on, it's been below 20% every year except one. So people don't trust Congress. People don't like Congress. People don't approve of the way Congress is doing their job. And that's Republicans and Democrats. So the approval of Congress is below 20%. And it's been that way since 2010, basically. 1 year it was 22%. They keep polls, Gallup keeps approval polls on the media as well. And from 1972 to 2006, the approval of the media has been between 72% and 51%. meaning more than half of the country approved of the job the media did from 1972 to 2006. Since 2006, every year, the approval of the media has been below 47%. It's been 47% or lower, and it's dropping every year. So what I think we have is the media and the politicians, the people that we depend on, or we used to depend on, to lead us and to tell us the truth and to tell us the stories that are going on objectively, without bias, without an agenda. Both of them have done a horrible job at keeping our trust. So it's no wonder when a Republican says one thing, the media and the politicians have done such a poor job. They divide us instead of bring us together. They have agendas on both sides. There are certain news stations that are right wing, and there are more that are left wing. I mean, Fox is a right wing, Republican focused news organization. I don't think that can be debated. But MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CNBC, MSNBC, CBS, and all those networks, they're all left wing, Democrat leaning networks. They all have an agenda. They all have a bias. We know that they've lied. We know that they've manufactured news on both sides. We know that they manipulate quotes. We know that they take things out of context. So you have a media that nobody trusts. And even if you do trust, you trust one side, not the other. And so they've divided us. They've divided us in terms of class and race and gender and beliefs, and you name it. They've divided us. I think, and I believe, that there's more that brings us together than separates us, but they focus on what separates us, the media does. And I think politicians realize that the way for them to raise money and stay in power is to get on those wedge issues and drive them home. So that's why you have certain groups that are going to be on one side of the aisle driving one side, and they're going to be far, far to the left or far, far to the right, and they're going to stay there because they know that that energizes their base, and that gets them to raise money so they can stay in power and not fix the issue. You look at any issue that this country faces, from the pandemic to immigration to problems in the inner city, to the unemployment, to education, you name it. The fixes aren't that difficult, in my opinion. You should be able to get some pretty smart people in the room from the Republican side and the Democrat side and come in and say, let's fix this issue. And I think they could, but they don't, because if they do, what do they have to do anymore? What are they going to do? They know that keeping that issue there allows them to raise money and to play games with us and stuff. So when the mask edict comes down and says you have to wear a mask, that's why there's a bunch of people that say, no, I'm not going to wear a mask, because I don't trust politicians. I don't trust the media. And that's why when the edict comes down to say, I'm going to wear a mask, there are people that say, yes, I'm going to wear a mask, because the people who don't want to wear a mask are of the opposite party of me, and I don't like them, and they're evil, and I'm righteous, and therefore we're just going to stay divided, and it's going to be a whole mess. So I don't want to say of course, I think that the pandemic is real. I've talked about this on, I think it was episode 2 or 3, to mask or not to mask. I'm down for wearing a mask. If it makes people feel better, I'm down for wearing a mask. As a believer, as someone who believes there is a God, and I want to show that love and show that peace and show that grace and mercy to people. If someone's hurting, if someone's scared, if someone asks me to do something and it's not that big a deal, I'm probably going to do it. And putting on a mask is really not that big of a deal. And if the government says we're to put on a mask, and now I can get into the Bible for a second. The Bible says that believers, we're supposed to be subject to the governing authorities. And so that's something maybe you could put in your theological pipe and smoke it before you post something on Facebook about how angry you are and how it's a conspiracy. And again, I understand, and you may be right. Maybe the numbers are inflated. We know that Florida, if you look at the cases in Florida, we know that there were a bunch of labs and hospitals that inflated the numbers to astronomical levels. They had a bunch of testing sites that were reporting 100% of every test that was submitted, it was positive. And they had to come back because some people did some checking on it. And it's like, well, it wasn't 100%. It was only 4%, or it was only 8%. And so the numbers are inflated. And when people see that, they distrust the media even more. They distrust the politicians even more. They distrust the people in power even more, and it makes them less likely to go along with that. So again, putting a mask on to me is not that big a deal. I'm not that bent out of shape about it. And I say, if you don't want to wear one, don't. Go to a store that doesn't require it. Go hang out in a town that doesn't require it. That's cool. But I think, and if you want to wear a mask, wear one. Again, if I go out and they say to wear a mask and I go to Walmart, I'm putting a mask on. I'm not going to fight. I don't want to be on YouTube, yelling at somebody like an idiot because I'm not wearing a mask. If I go to a store and they say we won't let you in unless you have a mask, I'm going to put a mask on. But then again, I say that I don't want to pretend like I'm righteous, because I'm not. There's times I go out, I don't wear a mask. And that's another thing that, we can maybe talk about hypocrisy too for a second. I think it's funny that, again, the people that are arguing for the masks, and saying that anyone who's not wearing a mask, you're killing grandma and you're just a horrible person, and it's a real thing. And then I've seen pictures on their Instagram or on their Snapchat or on their Facebook of, one day they're saying you better wear a mask, you're a horrible person if you don't. The next day they're out to dinner with their wife or their husband and not wearing a mask. Now in a restaurant you don't wear a mask, but I was thinking more in terms of they're out at a bar and they're not wearing a mask. They're out hanging out with a group of friends and nobody's wearing a mask. And that's kind of, they're out in the backyard somewhere hanging out with, 15 of their best friends, and nobody's wearing a mask. And so, hypocrisy is one thing. But I think that the biggest issue for me with this mask thing, and the reason that we have the reaction we have, is not so much the idea of the mask. It's the people that are telling us to wear the mask, the politicians and the media. We don't trust them. It's both sides. It depends on who's delivering the news, if we trust them or not, and they've divided us and they're going to continue to divide us. And so maybe as believers in a higher power, whether it's the Christian God or any other God, they want, God wants good. He wants peace. That's who he is. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. He wants us to be together. So instead of being so divisive, instead of being so angry, maybe take a step back again, put something in your theological pipe and smoke it, and think about it for a second, and think of things from a different perspective, and wonder why the reaction is. Again, I think the reaction is, we just don't trust people anymore. And I think they do it by design. We need to not let them win. And I think social media is part of that. I think that, people who do their own media and stuff on Facebook and Twitter, and these citizen journalists that are taking video of things, they drive things. And I think that can open some people's eyes. And I think having conversations where, you talk about your opinions and your beliefs, and try to understand why someone would say, hey, I'm not going to wear a mask, or, hey, why I think you should wear a mask. And then maybe realize that, a person who says they're not going to wear a mask, maybe they're not crazy. And a person who says you have to wear a mask, maybe there's a reason for it. And we can kind of learn to come together and start trusting each other, and then maybe not listen to the media so much, maybe not listen to the politicians so much, and they'll come around, because I think they need to do a better job. So I think that's something you could put in your theological pipe and smoke it. So put that in your theological pipe and smoke it. Think about that. And then, like I say, every time at the end of the episode, just go out and be nice. You'd be surprised how just a smile or a kind word or being friendly to somebody can change things. So go out and be nice. Put that in your theological pipe and smoke it. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.